But anyway, so we'll continue on. The what cycle did we just read? The cycle of noon. So, but anyway, we'll continue on. The cycle of dusk. Those Sylvari born during the time between noon and 6 p.m. are members of the cycle of dusk. They tend to be intelligent, philosophical, and retiring. Such Sylvari enjoy riddles and puzzles, and they prefer to spend their time in study rather than physical pursuits. In their garden, you'll find luminary Cahendis. I find it so hard to say these Sylvari 9. Cahedins, I think is how you say it, whose kind soul and gentle words have often been a balm to troubled Sylvari. It is his task to help newly awakened Sylvari understand what they have seen within the Dream of Dreams. Lastly, he's been seen studying the written languages of Tyria and determining whether the Sylvari should create a writing system of their own. I think that's kind of interesting. I like that they're talking about the writing systems again with Guild Wars, because we've only really heard of New Crichton, and I'm pretty sure obviously there's going to be some other ones going on there. It'd be interesting if that actually came more into the story, if you were playing as a Sylvari, something to do with actually translating things. That'd be kind of cool. Lastly, the cycle of night. Lastly, the Sylvari born during the late hours, from 6 p.m. to midnight, belong to the cycle of night. Many of these Sylvari are inclined to be solitary, preferring to travel alone. They are often secretive, self-contained, and quiet. The cycle of night's luminary is the astronomer Malamedes, credited with charting the skies and bringing mathematics to the Sylvari. This is interesting. I wonder why the Sylvari kind of have to do stuff like this, like chart the skies, research the languages, because we've seen that the other races clearly know that there was no indication of this in Guild Wars 1 at all, but we've seen that the other races do understand what's going on with the sky, because like just looking at Divinity's Reach, you've got that whole observatory, you've got that whole system of spinning planets and stuff. I'll tell you what, if somebody in beta doesn't go to that freaking thing and look up at the sky and be like, oh, look at all this stuff, and actually start looking at some of the planets and some of the interesting stuff, I'd love to know more about the solar system of Tyria and stuff. I'd just love to know more of that, about that stuff in general, really, because it's so hard to... I remember ages ago when we were doing Tomb of the Primeval Kings, I was kind of trying to talk about this, but it's such a confusing and interesting and weird topic. Kind of how the mists and the realms tie in with the physical realm when you compare it to outside space, and are other worlds in the physical universe that Tyria's in, or are they always in other realms, or is the physical universe of Tyria just that one solar system? It just boggles my mind. I'd love to know more about that kind of stuff. So apparently the Sylvari are researching this stuff, that he charted the skies. Maybe this Sylvari 25 years ago was the first guy to chart it for some reason. Only the Sylvari could do it, and only recently has that observatory in Divinity's Reach been built. That would be interesting, I suppose. Anyway, he was also the first to meet with the Asura, a bitter tale that he rarely tells. Although Malamedes is the most private of the luminaries, those who are awakened to his cycle speak of him as a stern mentor, but a caring one. This little thing here, the first to meet with the Asura, I don't think this blog post goes into it too much, but we kind of had heard in interviews about this kind of stuff for a while. The Sylvari and the Asura are very close to each other, obviously, and there's some fantastic stuff about what happened when the Asura first found out about the Sylvari and started just ruthlessly experimenting on them because they considered them to be an inferior race, and it just went on and on for ages until eventually the Asura backed off. It just sounds so brilliant. I love that story there. I'll definitely have to talk about that at some point. Anyway, we go back into this proper story bit for this blog post here. Oh, another huge bit. Okay, so here we go. Despite the signs of long ago death, the slumbering ruins felt somehow alive. The hush and whisper of tide below the cliff rising and falling like a sleeper's breath. Something low and shadowy, stinking of brine, cast a slender shadow among the crumbling rocks. Cadiern watched it pass between the tilted walls and fragmented arches that must have been a chapel. Saw it flicker where an altar once stood, marked where the shadow vanished away. "Are you prepared?" Nima murmured softly behind him, her frond-like hair rustling in the cold breeze. She drew her sword and checked its edge, finding it keen. Eager silver eyes met his gold gaze. It's time to strike. Two others of an even younger generation than Cadiern stood with her, both, like them, members of the Cycle of Noon. Cadiern stepped away from the little edge on which he'd been crouched. "They're ready for us. We must move cautiously." Together they crept down onto the beach and into the ruins, and there they found their quarry. Cadiern's sword cleaved a crate in two with a single stroke. He spun the weapon expertly behind his back, blocking another creature's claw before snapping down to slice away the extended hand. A Krayt sorceress's unblinking eyes widened as she wove a thaumaturgic web of slaughter, and two of the Sylvari died in her flame. Fiercely, Cadiern leapt towards her, his blade tearing through the Krayt's flesh. He left nothing behind but scale and scream. When the Crate were dead, Nima and Cadiern stood in the centre of the ruined chapel, blood on their blades and fierce smiles lighting their faces. A sound caught his attention, and he raised a hand for silence, slipping forward to the place where he'd seen movement from above. Cadiern tilted the altar aside, and the sound grew louder. Beneath the stone lay a cave, long ago flooded by the advance of the sea. There, in a sea cavern below the ruins, Crate lay in hiding, unperturbed by the icy waters. But these were not warriors. This was a hatchery filled with crate eggs and terrified young. He raised a sword to continue the extermination. "Cadiern," Nima said sharply. Cadiern paused, looking up at the leader of his cycle in confusion. "Leave them." "But they are crate. They are children." "Children." He frowned, for the word had little meaning. "You mean they are small. They are small, but they are crate. They'll grow up to be large crate, and then we will kill them. Why not kill them now, when it's easy and they are undefended? It seems the wisest course of action. Otherwise we risk losing more Sylvari lives when they return fully grown." "We must take that risk to give them a chance to change their ways," the firstborn said. "All things have a right to grow. The blossom is brother to the weed." Soberly, she put away her sword and pushed the altar back. Beneath it, Cadiern could hear the snake scrambling, splashing away into the ocean tide. "Again, the firstborn quote the tablet when I ask for logic," he growled beneath his breath. "I do not agree." So the next section is called Biology. I'll try to refrain bitching about people complaining how Sylvari is supposed to work. So Sylvari biology is very different from any other race. This is the thing most people have a problem about, actually, when it comes to the Sylvari, like their biology. They're like, oh, do they bleed? Do they do this? Well, hopefully this will answer your questions. Sylvari do not have internal organs, but instead are formed of growing plant matter, sap for blood, and leaves and bark for skin. So if you're bleeding as a Sylvari, hey, that's sap. A jaw, for example, can be formed by leaves, vines, or even shards of bark that grow and press together to form the silhouette. But if you look closely, you can still see the fibres and holes of the structure. Instead of bones, an arm is a mass of tightly woven sterns and leaves that work together to do the work of such a limb. If I'd never seen a Sylvari before, or kind of how their new redesign had been done, which had been revealed this week, and I read that paragraph, I think I would have the impression of them looking very quite cagey and hollow, and there being a lot of holes to them, but obviously that's not how they are. I like the idea that if you were to look close enough, there would be a lot of detail with them. I think generally, I've already talked about the redesign, but I think generally they did pull that off quite nicely. Many scholars hypothesize as to why the Sylvari look human-like at all, instead of having a monstrous form, such as other vegetable races possess. This is something I rarely think about, and I really think I should think about more. There are a lot of vegetable races, there are a lot of plant races. Think about the aloe seeds, and you had the thorn stalkers in particular around the Maguma and stuff like that. There are a lot of races like that. Sylvari aren't that unique. Think about oak hearts, how in Guild Wars 1 I think in Guild Wars 1 they looked way more sort of vegetable than they do in Guild Wars 2, but they're obviously like very big tree things. There is quite common interior for races to be like this. I remember a few theories, a lot of people tried to like find the cave, the seed that Ronan found. They tried to find that in Guild Wars 1, and I remember one particular area that a lot of people kind of thought, hey, this could have been it, was this area in the Maguma that had what looked like a cave in it, but it was protected by loads of thorn stalkers, which is also something quite interesting. I'm not convinced there's much of a relationship between the Sylvari and thorn stalkers and stuff like that, but hey, depending on how long ago the previous Sylvari were alive with the previous pale tree or whatever produced this seed back then, maybe those Sylvari were completely different, you know, like the Wardens. Maybe the Wardens back in their time, if they were Sylvari, looked very different to the Sylvari that are all the way up here in Tyrion. Maybe each tree is unique in its own way, you know, you just never really know about these things. But do consider there are a lot of vegetable races. Some suggest that the Pale Tree saw mostly humans during her youth. Individuals such as Ronan, who planted the seed, and others around the Pale Tree may have been physical role models for her eventual children. So yeah, this is something I don't really mention. I like the popular Asuran theory, which they're about to talk about. But yeah, this is true. I mean, think about Guild Wars 1. Again, there were loads of humans around there. We already saw it as a pretty nice little settlement there already. Obviously, Ventari was a huge part of it, and he was a centaur. Why, if this is true, if this theory is true, why don't some Sylvari look like centaurs? That would be something that I would ask. There is, however, a different theory. A popular Asura theory is that the Pale Tree was planted on the graves of Ronan's daughter and his ruined village, and their discorporate mass, as they call it, was absorbed into the ground. The Pale Tree took nourishment from that soil, and therefore the Sylvari are predisposed to be shaped in a humanoid manner. I think this is one of those things where if you were to ever ask the writers, hey, which of these is true, they would say it's probably a bit from column A and a bit from column B. I like the idea that there's not a definite answer here, even though people always kind of look for one. They're like, oh, why do they look like humans? Whatever. I think it's kind of cool. I think it would be very interesting if there was some kind of a quest or NPC out there that was a Sylvari but looked very much like a centaur. I think that'd be really, really cool. And then maybe there was some really elaborate event chain or decent storyline around that. I think that'd be pretty sweet. And he's like, oh, I'm an outcast, why do I look like this? And maybe it's because that was the Sylvari that the Pale Tree cared most about, because she believed in Ventari's meanings above all others, or whatever. Anyway, Sylvari do, so we got another bit of concept out there. Sylvari do sleep, and they can eat both meat and vegetables. They drink, as other races do, but they can get tipsy on alcoholic beverages. They gain enjoyment from sitting in the sunlight, and it invigorates them, but can't live on it as plants do. I like these little changes here as well. They talk about these little things that make the Sylvari different. Sitting in the sunlight invigorates them and makes them happy. That's really, really cool. Their blood is a sticky sap, and though they can bleed, they do not have blood pressure or a pulse, so it just kind of oozes out of them. No one knows how long the Sylvari live. The oldest of their race are the firstborn, all of whom awakened 25 years ago. Sylvari show little signs of growing old. I almost mentioned something there, but I think that's a little bit of a spoiler, so I won't talk about that yet. Sylvari show little signs of growing old, and none have yet died of advanced age. Physically, Sylvari... So, I've mentioned before that they don't die of old age, and somebody left a comment, and I should probably clarify this. We don't know that they don't die of old age, it's just we've seen no evidence that they will, because they barely seem to age anyway. But, you know, if the youngest ones are 25... If the oldest ones are 25 years old, then it probably could be another 10 years, say, interior before we start to see them really begin to get a bit aged, if they are modelled after humans, for instance. I mean, we know the Norn in particular don't age for a very long time. Physically, Sylvari are male or female, and the relevant external biology is accurate on both. But they cannot sexually reproduce as the other races do. They have no internal organs capable of creating children, because they're plants. Whether they have their own... Did you hear? I kind of added that bit in there. Whether they have their own methods of reproduction outside of the Pale Tree has yet to be seen. Has yet to be seen. They kind of leave that door open there a little bit, I suppose. I'm not sure they're doing themselves any favours with that. But Sylvari grow their armour and much of their own clothing. Their bodies create petal-like coverings, vines and leaves that they shape into pleasing garments. When they wish to remove the garments, they simply shed their petal clothing as a human might cut their hair. Some Sylvari wear armour made by the other races, or weave clothing in a more traditional manner, just out of preference. As an adopted custom, they cover themselves as humans do, concealing certain portions of their anatomy where it seems culturally appropriate. See, that's something interesting as well. I wonder kind of where they learned that from. I'm guessing they would have learned these kind of cultural influences from the Asura. And that's a pretty big topic as well that I don't really often think about, but how these tiny little parts of the way the cultures work have evolved through the different races. So, like, and I suppose we don't think about it enough because ArenaNet haven't defined it enough. You know, Asura clearly wear different clothes. They like their headdresses a lot more than obviously humans do, but there's nothing significant about that. They all seem to cover up the same areas and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose it doesn't really matter who the Sylvari found first. But okay, so we got the next bit of the story here. Just scrolling down. There's so much of the blog post yet left. This is ridiculous. 37 minutes. Do you know what, guys? I'm going to cut it off there. I want to go get some dinner. So I will see you guys next time. We've been going for about 40 minutes. And I hope you guys enjoyed these videos. This is probably going to be split in two. Also, I'm filming this. This is just before beta is going on with Guild Wars 2. As you all know, I'm not in beta, so I'm not going to be able to provide any coverage of anything like that. However, the more I look, the more I see there are a lot of people who have got permissions to film stuff, and people have got very big, ambitious stuff. And I would like to see the information that comes out of beta and talk about it with you guys. So I'll probably be watching a lot of YouTube stuff and seeing kind of what comes out, and maybe expect some videos on that kind of thing. Obviously, it wouldn't be direct beta coverage from me, but I kind of want to have a bite of the pie, really, because there's going to be a lot coming out, and I want to kind of keep on top with it and know what I'm doing. So you might see some videos like that. You might not. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.